Thank you, Madam President. Good morning, colleagues. Madam President, before I proceed, I want to extend welcome back wishes to colleague Senator Francis, as well as other colleague Senator Francis, who were absent at our last sitting. Madam President, this morning we are here to seek permission of Parliament to grant the extension of a state of emergency from the 17th of May 2021 for an additional 5 months to the 16th of October of this year, 2021. I have listened to the attempt by the leader of government business to justify or to attempt to justify the extension. I have carefully paid attention to the arguments that have been presented as well by the Honorable Prime Minister. And I've also paid attention to the reactions of my fellow colleague, my St. Lucian colleagues, my fellow St. Lucians, what they believe, what they feel. And so my response this morning is based on all of the above. And I will seek to ask a few questions and offer my own views on what I make of this request or this attempt to extend the state of emergency. Madam President, we have heard that a major argument presented is to manage COVID. I will be the first to say that we need to manage COVID. St. Lucia has been through this crisis for a while, and any attempt that is made by the CMO, the government, the people, friends of the state, citizens alike, voluntary groups, everyone, to try to manage this situation, I would applaud. However, Madam President, I am very concerned and I am very curious about the reason why the extension for a state of emergency is being sought, particularly for a period of 5 months. I am curious about the raison d'etre for this significantly long extension. Now, we have been to this Honorable House before to seek extension for the state of emergency, but I think this is the longest period that we are requesting. So, Madam President, let us examine an argument that was presented first by the Prime Minister for the extension. The Prime Minister indicated that for the last few months, the country has seen an improvement in the number of cases, that is a reduction in the number of cases of COVID. And I want to take the opportunity to commend St. Lucians, particularly our frontline workers, the police, healthcare providers, and everyone who has contributed to that which the Prime Minister described. But as soon as that proclamation or that description was given, what is the response that we get? Here we are, we're seeing some progress, and all of us want it to continue. But what is the response? We impose a 5-month state of emergency. Is that the response? When we are starting to see a semblance of improvement as claimed by the Prime Minister? Madam President, the imposition of the state of emergency at this point does not sit in congruence with the previous case that the government put for the state of emergency when we last came to this House. Back then, it was because there was certain legislation that had to be passed and certain decisions that had to be made, and there had been a spike, and so things had to be brought under control. So if there is no spike, there is no recent spike, on the contrary, there seems to be a reduction, then why 5 months? Why? Madam President, I don't get the logic in this. We have been here before, Madam President, to deal with legislation that has attempted or that has been presented to deal with COVID. The government has passed the COVID Prevention Act, and the only thing it does not authorize the government to do without coming to the Parliament is to impose a curfew. All of the other conditions that are necessary to keep COVID under control, the protocols, the adjustments, and all of those can be achieved by that very piece of legislation. And so, if that is the case, then why is it necessary to have a 5-month extension? And this 5-month extension, Madam President, if you note well, it goes beyond the dissolution date of Parliament, which is supposed to be in July. So, Madam President, well, the 6th of June was the election date, and then the first sitting of Parliament was in July. So, if that is the case, and the government was concerned about not being able to come back to the Parliament to make adjustments to the resolution, the Constitution under Section 55, I think it's subsection 5, does make provision for, under state of emergency, for the Parliament to meet or convene and do that. And so, in that regard, if the government had to return after the dissolution of Parliament to impose a state of emergency or any other legislation in that regard, not a state of emergency, but any legislation in that regard, then provision is made for that to happen. So, for example, we could have come back after the dissolution of Parliament to pass legislation for a shorter period to manage the situation as required. But instead, we are taking a decision now to have a 5-month extension, all the way down to October. So, Madam President, if the argument, therefore, is COVID, that is what we want to do, we want to manage COVID, then, Madam President, permit me to have a short discussion on COVID. Madam President, let us start by making a comparison. I always like to, when I present arguments, present comparisons that we can relate to. And let us start with our neighboring Barbados. Neighboring country, very similar issues with us. The population is about 1.5 times ours. They used to be a hub for tourists in the Caribbean, or they are. But, Madam President, look at what is happening there. Despite the population of Barbados being about 1.5 times ours, Barbados is doing about 4 times the testing that we are currently doing. Barbados has over 1,000 less cases than we do. And Barbados certainly has far less deaths than we do. And so, if we are putting a case for an extended state of emergency, and I understood the Prime Minister visited Barbados sometime last week, I hope he took some time to ask the Prime Minister of Barbados how she was able, or how she's able to keep the number of cases in her country far below ours, how she's able to keep the number of deaths in her country far below ours, and how she's able to have testing, because the population is much larger, 4 times the amount of testing that we do. So I think these are some of the best practices that we should start looking at. before we just decide to impose extended state of emergencies on our people and try to justify it by using the COVID argument. Madam President, another argument that is related to COVID was presented when the opposition challenged the government on the number of deaths. And one of the arguments was that most of these deaths were because of pre-existing conditions, as if to suggest that these people would have died anyway. Madam President, I contend that even people with pre-existing conditions, had there been no COVID, the pre-existing conditions may not have resulted in their death. Whether it's diabetes, hypertension, heart problems, respiratory issues, without the COVID situation, without COVID, they would not have perished. That is just logic. And so to present the argument that, okay, they were pre-existing conditions, they would have died. And so, Madam President, I think the focus should be to strengthen our practices, our capacity to test, our protocols, our vaccination program. I heard mention of it earlier. These are the areas where you would expect a stronger focus now that there is a semblance of reduction. A state of emergency is not required to do any of those things. You do not need a state of emergency to increase testing. You do not need a state of emergency to increase your vaccination capacity. You do not need a state of emergency, Madam President, to take some of the measures that you need to take to continue to cause the number of cases of COVID to go down and hopefully eliminate completely. So, Madam President, I go back to the question, therefore, what is the real reason why you need to impose the state of emergency at this time for 5 months? Now, I am not suggesting that there will never be a need for a state of emergency, although we have argued that before. But if you decide that it is so necessary, I continue to ask, why is it being imposed and why for 5 months? So, Madam President, I think that this raises, again, suspicion among the people of St. Lucia, particularly since it's going past the month of July. Madam President, I have given some of the suggestions as to what the government can continue to do to strengthen our fight against COVID. I also suggest that the government can continue to look at how we can improve income support, because some people still remain out of employment, families are still suffering. The government can continue to look at the ways that we can achieve herd immunity, herd immunity. I think that it is very clear, and I've made that suggestion in the House before, that our target in St. Lucia should have been by now to achieve that 70%. And if we are falling short, we can strengthen those measures. State of emergency is not required for you to do that. And the countries in the region that have gotten closer to herd immunity than we have, Madam President, do the research. Most of them have not imposed a state of emergency on the people of the country. And so, Madam President, the logic is not there. Now, the leader of government business this morning mentioned this in her argument, indicated that these measures can have strong emotional and psychosocial effects on the people, and that is true. And if that is the case, if we were aware that in addition to the economic hardship and all the other problems that occur when you impose curfews on those, why is it therefore that the people are already going through so many months of emotional, social, psychosocial stress and discomfort? Why then do you impose an additional 5 months of a state of emergency on these people? And your justification is to manage COVID, when we can show and we can argue very clearly that you can achieve every single thing that you want to achieve without a state of emergency. And if it becomes necessary, the Constitution even provides you, after the dissolution of Parliament, to come back to be able to pass legislation. So, Madam President, I still cannot find the justification in the argument that has been presented to us by this government. But I say to you, Madam President, while the arguments continue to be presented, the reasoning of the people have in no way been compromised. They can read right through this. We know the issues with small businesses, how they've suffered in the last few months. We know the issues with our police officers, their services. Every day they have to deal with a lot of issues because of the new protocols. They have been exhausted. We have heard that the COVID wardens were appointed to help. And by the way, Madam President, I'm very curious, what is the situation with them as we go forward? What is their status? I hope we can get an update on that. So, Madam President, after all of that, the only thing we can come up with is to impose a 5-month state of emergency. As if we are holding the people of St. Lucia hostage. That we are stifling them, we're keeping them, there's oppression, you're feeling this is that is the response and the reaction that you are getting on the ground from the people. And so, Madam President, anytime that happens, people get uncomfortable, they get suspicious, and they tend to want to resist. And I have always said in this House, Madam President, when you want compliance and you want people to buy into what you are doing, you do not do so with any high-handed measures. You have to win people over by educating them, by giving them the impression that you empathize, that they can see value in what you're doing for them, and they will buy in and cooperate. The more you try to take the high-handed, suppressive approach, is the more people feel backed in a corner, and the more they will resist. The psychology is clear about that. And so, I am not sure that this is the way to go. I think we can do better, Madam President. Therefore, Madam President, I want to wrap up by saying to St. Lucians who have to deal with these next 5 months that they need to hold on. Continue to hold on, obey the protocols, continue to cooperate as much as they can, continue to do what the law says that they should do, even if they feel oppressed and suppressed and they need to exhale. I say to them, hold on. Let us be law-abiding citizens. Because the day will come very soon, Madam President, that our St. Lucians will have a chance to exhale. So hold on, because the day will come when you will soon deliver us from the hold and all that has happened, that has made us uncomfortable under this present government. Madam President, I thank you.